And this is a thrill for us. Honestly, one of the voices of our generation when it comes to whatever it is, baseball, hockey, college football, NFL. Sean McDonough is one of the best. NHL on ESPN. He called the Lightning Maple Leafs last night. He now heads to Boston. Game 2, Panthers, Bruins, and we say hi to Sean. Sean, thank you. It's an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well,
you know
thank you,
how
Patrick.
much.
Appreciate the nice introduction, and hello to you and them all. Nice to be with you.
No, seriously, it's a pleasure for us. So thank you so much for taking the time. You know how much it means to those fans in Toronto. Give me an idea of what it felt like with those 3 early goals by the Lightning inside that building in that barn last night.
Well, it was obviously angst-inducing for them. And, I don't know if you guys watched the game, but they got booed off the ice, the Leafs, at the end of the first period. So when they were down 3-0. So it didn't take long. There's just so much pressure on Toronto. You guys know the history, 6 straight years out in the first round, haven't won a playoff series since '04. So, and they just love their Leafs so passionately up there. So a lot of pressure on them, and every team, every article that you read about these game one seems like everybody on every team is talking about first game jitters, the excitement of playing in the playoffs, even if you've been in them before. So I think both teams, a lot of teams have experienced that, but it really seemed to impact Toronto early. Then they got back in the game and got a huge match penalty that really kind of took them right back out of the game.
Mr. McDonough, first thing, I always appreciate during college football when you call out the officials for taking too long during the replays. I absolutely love that. I wish more play-by-play guys would do that.
Well, I just think replay was supposed to correct obvious mistakes, right? And it's really a shame that we've gone so far away from that. It was the old adage, if 50 people were sitting in a bar and even couldn't hear the sound, looked up at the TV and saw, hey, that guy's clearly out of bounds. That's what you're supposed to correct. Now we're going frame by frame to see, did the tip of the ball touch the guy's shoe or what? And it's, and it's supposed to be clear and obvious to overturn calls. Well, if it takes 4 minutes, how is that clear or obvious? So, yeah, it's one of my pet peeves. But, the officials have a tough job, and it gets harder and harder by the years. The athletes get bigger and faster and stronger in all these sports.
I just appreciate somebody in that position actually makes the comment. Want to go to the game you're calling tonight, Bruins and Panthers. This Bruins team has been electric. We know the accomplishments they've had during the regular season. What chance do you give this Panthers squad? They're not as good as they were last year. They just don't seem to have the offensive prowess. And against a team like Boston, who, if people didn't pay attention during the regular season, they got better as the game progressed. They were level in the first period, usually against their opponents, if not slightly better. And then in the third period, they were dominant over their opponents this year. It seems like, to me, it's going to be a real challenge. How, from your perspective, can Florida really make this a series?
Well, I think it's good and bad for them out of Monday night, out of game one, because, for a lot of the game, really, as Paul Maurice said today, he was happy with the first 36 minutes, so more than the first half of the game. And they really carried the play. I mean, they outshot Boston 15-8 in the first period. It's obvious their plan is, to try to crowd the net, create chaos in front of Ullmark, assuming he'll be the goalie for most of the series. He will be again tonight. And, get the puck back to the point and then try to get some shots that are screened and get some rebounds. They did a lot of that, but they just didn't get a lot of shots on goal that were screened or get any rebounds when they were there. So I think that's their plan. They did a nice job, very aggressively forechecking, and gave Boston a problem with that. But I like the point that you made, Amal, at the beginning of that. The Bruins, I believe, have lost one game in regulation all year when they scored first, and that was against Edmonton, or when they had a lead after one period. And, for so much of my life watching hockey, teams that have the lead sit back in the defensive end and just defend, and try to get the puck out. And that doesn't always work very well. These Bruins keep attacking. I mean, the defensemen keep pinching in. The defensemen keep joining the rush. If there's an odd man rush, they go to join it. And they're not sitting back. And I think that's a big reason why they've been successful in protecting all these leads.
Mr. McDonough, as a native New Englander, I know you don't want to hear this, but I think the Rangers are a real threat coming out of the Eastern Conference. I think Ullmark's had the best year, but I think Igor Shesterkin's the best goaltender. From your perspective, are we on a collision course for these two teams to match up?
Well, it's hard to say because I think the Eastern Conference is stacked. I really do like the Rangers. I agree with you. I mean, I think if you had a draft of the GMs in the NHL and said, okay, you can pick your goalie. There'd be many of them that would pick Shesterkin. I think many would still take Vasilevsky from Tampa based on his body of work. But what Shesterkin did last year was amazing. And, when you're that talented, you're capable of doing that again. He wasn't as good this year, but I think part of that was, by his own admission, the pressure to kind of live up to what he did last year. I think the Rangers are super talented, and I think they have a really good chance. I mean, Boston still has to be the favorite, regardless of who they play in any series, based on the season they're having and the depth of their team and the quality of their goaltending. But, the Rangers are certainly capable of winning the Stanley Cup, and I think there are several other teams around the NHL who are as well.
The great Sean McDonough here on Sharp Money, VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, tonight with the Boston Call. Think about it, Sean, and this is what makes the Stanley Cup playoffs amazing. You had 4 games last night, all dogs winners, right? Winnipeg at VGK, Tampa Bay, which you called at Toronto. How about the Rangers at the Devils and the Kraken at Colorado? That's what makes this postseason so special.
Well, there's the old adage, there's nothing better than the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I agree with that. Not only, I didn't realize they were all underdogs, but they were all the visiting teams, too. And in the first 2 rounds of visiting, first 2 days, the 8 games that have been played, the visiting team has won 6 out of the 8. Only Carolina and Boston have won at home so far. So, that's part of it. Home ice is important in hockey, but I don't think it's as important in the other sports. Where sometimes maybe the officiating is impacted or the teams play off the crowd, the energy of the home crowd. And I just think, like quarterbacks in football, in pitchers in baseball, it's goalies in hockey. And I think generally, like everybody kind of seemed to be jumping on the Toronto bandwagon heading into that series last night. And they still very well may win it. They're a very talented team. But to me, when you look at Vasilevsky, who's become one of the great playoff goalies of all time, based on what he's done for several years now, against Samsonov, who's now won 1 out of 9 playoff games. If Toronto is a more talented team around the goalies, certainly you take Tampa Bay's goalie. And I think that's, some of the case, if you look at that Vegas series against Winnipeg. I mean, the Vegas, it's remarkable what Bruce Cassidy and that team did this year with all the injuries to the goalies. But, if you said who's the best goalie in that series, it's Connor Hellebuck by far. So I think that's part of the fun of the playoffs. If you get a hot goalie, even if you're the underdog, you have a chance.
Mr. McDonough, you saw Tampa in person the other day. I say that John Cooper is the best coach in North American sports among the 4 professional sports. This team's gone to 3 straight Stanley Cups. They've been unbelievable. I thought they would have some wear and tear just based on playing the equivalent of an extra season. You didn't see that. Can this team make another run one more time?
Yeah, I think they can. I would have to think about the other major sports before I just quickly agree with you. But no one is coming rushing to mind for me to make an argument for somebody else. And one of the real treats of doing this job now for the last 2 seasons is being around him. John Cooper is one of those guys who would be good at anything. He's super smart. He's great with people. He just understands pretty much every aspect of life around the rink and away from it. So he's a great coach. He's on his way to the Hall of Fame. There's no question about that. It's remarkable that they keep doing it in a salary cap era where they have to keep saying goodbye to guys they don't want to say goodbye to. And at the trade deadline, try to bring in people who help, and they've done a great job of that. And, I think this year, people might have been sleeping on them a little bit coming into the playoffs just because, they weren't playing particularly well coming into the playoffs. But, they've known for months that they were going to play Toronto in the first round. I mean, Boston was going to win the division, and, 2 and 3, Toronto and Tampa Bay had a big lead on number 4 in their division. So you knew for months they were going to play each other. So really the only thing they were playing for was home ice advantage. And that wasn't that big a deal to Tampa Bay. So, I don't think they played with their usual full intensity through most of the season. I think we saw that last night. They flipped the switch, played in very high gear last night, reminiscent of what they've done in the past. And, I don't think they're quite what they've been in recent years, but there's still a lot of talent there and a lot of great coaching, as you said, to go very deep into these playoffs.
The great Sean McDonough, NHL ESPN, of course, tonight in Boston with the call. I'm going to embarrass you as we say goodbye. Our producer, Dustin Sweetelson, has been booking guests for many, many, many years, and he told me this morning the kindest guy I talked to through text is Sean McDonough. You're too big of a deal. You don't have to be nice to our producer, Sean. You can go easy on that.
Well, my dad, the late, great Will McDonough, who was a great friend of your friend, Brent Musburger, my dad used to say, it's the easiest thing in the world to be nice. It takes energy to be a jerk. I'll clean it up, what my dad used to say. And, so I really appreciate that. I've hosted shows myself, and I certainly don't like it when people say no. So if I have the opportunity to talk to nice guys like you, I'm going to do it.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.